Hello and welcome to Andy Harper's Digital Art School. I just got to go through a few housekeeping things before we get started, and then I'll hand over to Andy, who will introduce his workshop. So as always, the workshop's being recorded, but the only people on screen are myself and Phoebe, who's here presenting with me today, and Andy. So none of your screens are on, but the recording will be available to watch later on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it back. We also have a 10-minute version of the video, which is already on YouTube for you to watch. And Andy going through the workshop there. So if you want to catch up in that way, you can also do that. After the workshop, we're going to share a Dropbox link where you can upload photos of anything you've made in today's workshop, and we'd love to see those. And we'll put them on our website too. Throughout the workshop, we have a Q&A feature. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A. Any questions you have for Andy or for us about anything to do with the workshop, please just pop them in there and we'll relay them to Andy at kind of specific points through the workshop. That can be questions or any kind of comments on what you're doing. And we'd also obviously like to thank Seasalt, who have kindly sponsored this series of workshops this term. And they've been supporting us for the last 2 years. And also supporting an upcoming project at a mother and baby unit in London. So Seasalt is the reason we're working with all the great Cornish artists we're working with at the moment. So a little bit about hospital rooms before I introduce Andy. We are an arts and mental health unit working in inpatient mental health wards, transforming them with contemporary art. So artists will come in, run workshops on the units and install artworks there too. Andy Harper is an artist who worked with us at a recent project in Plymouth, Greenfields unit. Here's a picture of the work he made for the unit there. And Andy's work is sort of the driving mechanism is to do with movement, colour, mark making, kind of depth of field. This is a painting he made for a fundraising auction we made recently, so you can see the kind of amazing detail and depth there. And today's session, he'll be working sort of with that kind of mark making, those mark making ideas, along with music. So that's all I've really got to say. I'm going to hand over to Andy now, and over to you, Andy.
Cool. So just to make sure I've got that coming through, the music or the sound coming through, I will do that. And yeah, hello everyone. So yeah, what we're going to do today is sort of try to sort of make some marks on some surfaces, on some pieces of paper, with a variety of materials that I'll show you in a minute. But as Louis was saying in the introduction there, and as you can see from some of the sort of work around me, I'm really interested in mark making. And what I mean by that is what sort of marks a kind of simple sort of drawing tool can make on a surface. And normally I work oil paint, I work wet into wet, and I push various brushes, rubber tools, kind of ceramic tools, even feathers, and even compressed air into a wet layer of oil paint. And sort of everything I do is just about sort of expanding that kind of vocabulary, so I make as many marks as possible. So what I thought I'd do for this workshop, and what was, what I felt I had to do was something that would kind of be interesting and new for me to do, as well as to sort of share with you. And recently I've been working in sound. I loosely call it music sometimes, but let's just call it sound for now, and then we're safe and there's no qualitative judgments on the things you're going to hear in a minute. And I thought, how could I kind of use this kind of sound to sort of think and rethink my process of mark making, drawing and painting on a surface. And so what I'd like us, the simple way of explaining what we're going to do is I'm going to play some sounds that are going to come through Zoom and hopefully be in your room acoustically quite well. The music will be fed straight to you. And during that time, we're going to sort of try and get into those sounds and make marks in relation to those sounds that we hear, okay? And the other reason why I'm quite interested in doing this is because I also want us to sort of be uninhibited about making something completely abstract. So I remember the first time I made abstract work when I was at college, and I sort of felt a bit sort of silly or weird, and I wasn't quite sure what I was doing, and it took me a really long time to sort of find a language that I was comfortable with working kind of abstractly. Because abstractly, it's like, you know, you're not like looking at a drawing of a bird and saying, does it look like a bird or not? So suddenly there's sort of nothing to sort of judge it with. And so it seems as if we can listen to sound and try and interpret it into making marks, then it's a way of us sort of making abstract work without sort of that sort of embarrassment of like just sort of trying to draw lines. So there's a couple of aspects to this. One is trying to push whatever implement you use to draw with as much as possible. So you get a overall mark, okay? So they have character, okay? And I'll demonstrate this in a minute. And the other thing is try to refrain from drawing something that's recognizable. So at no point during this session sort of suddenly think, oh, that looks a bit like a bird, I'll put some feathers on it or something. Like, we're not trying to do that at all. We're just literally trying to sort of think about that kind of contact point of, you know, this implement on the paper, okay? So what I've got in front of me, I'll do it with a marker pen just because it's really direct. But what I've got in front of me, I've got loads of things over here, which I'll show you in a minute as and when I kind of use them. But I've put a piece of newspaper print down, just, it could be a piece of newspaper or whatever, and I've just put that on the table. And the reason for that is I quite like the idea that if we want to, we can sort of, you know, draw over the edge, and it won't matter that we've gone on the table, right? So this drawing won't so we can write to kind of edges. Okay, it froze then, but hopefully it's caught back up.
Okay, for a moment.
So yeah, we're okay, cool. So so whatever you've got in front of you to draw, now I've got loads of things over here that I might demonstrate in a minute, but I've got charcoal, I've got biro, I've got, as you saw, Sharpie, and a really big fat kind of marker pen, and even a pencil, and some rubbers. And then we'll talk about the colour stuff in a minute. But if you could just, whatever you've chosen to use now for the next kind of drawing exercise, if you could just think about all the different ways, and we're just going to spend like 30 or 40, 50 seconds on this, just literally applying that pen to the paper or that pencil or piece of charcoal, whatever you've got to draw with, in as many different ways as you can. So just as an example, if I draw a very slow line, okay, that's very slow, so it's just a question of speed. And then if I draw a fast line, you can see that, okay, these lines are pretty similar, but because this one's got a slight sort of up and down wobble to it, it has a different kind of character. And the same would be the case for sort of stabs or sort of gentle marks that are almost the same proportions, but suddenly they have a different character. So I literally want you just to, right now, I'm going to do it for a little while, get used to my marker pen, just literally 30 seconds, just make a bit of a mess on your piece of paper, practicing with these fast, slow, stabs, rolling, whatever you want to do with this marker pen or whatever implement you're using. Okay, so I was just having fun there. So basically there was some huge sweeps going across where I was using the whole kind of arc of my elbow. I did some dotting, I even did some sort of weird rolling thing, which I didn't think I was going to do, but suddenly I sort of thought that might kind of make a really strange kind of mark and very different from some of the other marks. I was doing these quick kind of scribbles, which kind of led this little cluster of kind of marks and so on. And then I just did these long drawn out lines and so on. So you can see on this piece of paper, there's a massive kind of different character of marks. And what we're going to try and do next is try and use the sort of sound of a piece of sound or music that I play you to try and kind of like direct some of these marks. So can you interpret the sounds to sort of make these kind of marks? Like what, I mean, in a way, we can already start to sort of think that these dots are almost like sharp beats or something, and the lines are like notes maybe, and so on. But I don't want to put too many things in your mind to sort of interpret it. It's how you interpret this sound that I'm going to play. So I'm going to get a new piece of paper. Is there any questions about that didn't kind of make sense? Is there anyone sort of querying what we're doing so far?
We haven't had any questions through yet, but yeah, as you say, Andy, if anyone does have any questions, please let us know. But all quiet for the moment, so maybe we'll get started with the first one.
That's great. Okay, cool. So this first piece of sound is quite sort of recognisably music in the sense that it has a kind of beat and a pattern and a rhythm going through it. It's only about 2 minutes, but I won't talk while we're playing it through for the 2 minutes. And I'm just going to sort of try and listen really hard to the sounds that are happening. You know, this is what's interesting about kind of music and sound, is we're often sort of slightly suspect or suspicious, I should say, sorry, of kind of abstract art. Like we kind of want to know a kind of backstory and how it got to that abstraction. But with music, we really accept it into our lives, and it's just sort of a series of sounds. You know, they are abstract themselves. So yeah, listen to it and see how it kind of reverberates in relation to your kind of drawing and how you make marks. So about 2 minutes.
Andy, just before we do start, we have had
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got a deaf unit joining us today, so we know that they're using other senses. I don't know if you want to kind of mention how you can work with responding to other senses when you're mark making.
Yeah, I heard a deaf unit were joining us, and that's great because I sort of had to think about it a little while, and I know that you have been sent some objects that smell and taste, and I kind of if you want to sort of use like the objects that smell, or the objects, I hear you've got some free chocolates, which I'm quite jealous of, but if instead, whilst this music's playing, you could use those 2 minutes to taste or smell those things and see if again you can transfer the sense of those things into drawing. Like, are they sharp tastes? Are they mellow smells, or so on, and see how that kind of affects your drawing. But also, obviously, I think a lot of people assume that deaf people can't actually enjoy music, which is not right at all. So you may hear the sounds in a different way, but I understand through vibrations and reverberations, you still experience that. So you could still work from the sound if you wished. The other thing I wanted to say is that the best way to kind of do this would be with headphones on, or with sort of loud speakers, you know, where the sound is quite physical. And that, again, for deaf people would be a real advantage. So often people sort of talk about kind of feeling sound kind of gutturally. You know, there are certain bass notes which are so low frequencies that they do actually affect us physically. So yeah, so in relation to that deaf unit, completely up to you. Use the objects we've sent you, the things with a smell or the things with a taste, if you wish. But also feel free to join in with listening to the sound in the way in which you can experience it. So any other questions?
Not at the moment. I think we're good to go.
Cool. So 2 minutes. Oh, I nearly hit the wrong one. Let's just check. Okay, so it wasn't kept cutting out. It purposely kind of stops and starts again. And I wasn't quite sure how to deal with that, but I was really sort of aware. I was really aware of obviously that beat that was coming through, like, doof, doof, doof. And I just couldn't. And because it kept repeating and reiterating, I kept sort of thinking about these sort of dark marks kind of continually being kind of thumped out across it, so that kind of thing. And then there was these other kind of a little more high-pitched kind of percussive hi-hats and stuff, and that was what I was sort of thinking about, these little kind of dashes across. And then there was also a sort of more melodic kind of organ synthesizer noise that was sort of rising and falling, and this was that kind of line. And I wasn't quite sure how to sort of have those cutouts where it just sort of suddenly stopped, but I sort of like just took some chunks out of the composition or something. But I mean, the way I interpret it is not the correct way of interpreting it. It's like, it's completely down to you. And I mean, if you are lucky enough to be synesthesic or chromesthesic, I think it's called, then certain sounds will like produce colours in your head and movement possibly. So, I'm not synesthetic. I wish I was. I'd be a lot better at this if I was. But yeah, synesthesia is where one sense triggers a perception in another sense in which you're not perceiving that thing. So a great example of this is Vasily Kandinsky, who was said to be synesthesic, and he wrote that he associated the middle C on a brass instrument in an orchestra with the colour yellow, for instance. So I suppose I'm just trying to sort of work up kind of understanding of the sound by sort of interpreting these kind of marks. But as I say, there's no correct way. It's purely down to your interpretation and how you can get that in different kind of marks. So let's put that to the side, and we'll do another one. This time, to change a bit, I'm going to use charcoal, and I thought what we might do is we might play the next one sort of, just checking. Okay, yeah, we've got one that is 1 minute. This one's quite a full-on sound. You wouldn't put this in the kind of music realm. It's quite noisy and quite claustrophobic. And what I thought we'd do here is we'd do it once just with the black and white instrument we're using, whether that's marker pen. I'm going to try charcoal. You know, charcoal makes all sorts of different kind of marks that I'm going to play around with. And then maybe we'll listen to it again and see if we can add colour to that. And I'll talk about the colour in a minute. So any questions before I start this second one?
There was just a question, Andy, just about, is there any particular mark that you're drawn to more than others that you sort of are unaware of, but you come back to quite a lot? Yeah,
in this exercise, all of these marks are unfamiliar to me. I'm really making this up. As Louis said, there is a YouTube shorter sort of version of the workshop where I did do this exercise 3 times. That is the only time I've done it before. So I really wanted to do this as fresh as possible along with you while you were doing it for the first time. So in what I'm doing here, there's nothing really familiar that I'm returning to. I mean, you could say that I scribble, and I've scribbled since I was 4 years old or something, so I'm returning to it. But certainly it's a good question in relation to the work that's behind me. There is a whole kind of vocabulary, almost like a sort of muscle memory of certain kind of characters and brush marks that I continue time and time again. And what's interesting is over time, as I put them in different paintings, I think they're the same mark, but actually they kind of change and mutate each time I kind of like rehearse them, practice them and change them. And that actually leads me on to just saying that, you know, this exercise is not something that I'm doing with you today so that you can produce great bits of work today. It's about sort of just setting up the parameters of a kind of activity that I really hope that you, or some of you who enjoy it, would do it in your own time to your own choice of music. So, you know, just literally you could do it with a biro and a pen, you know, a pen and a notepad like this. It's not doodling. I think when I've talked about to people, people think, oh yeah, well, people doodle. It's not quite doodle. If it becomes doodling, it means you're not trying to connect the sound of what you're listening to the marks, okay? And sometimes it can feel like it's getting a bit like you're just doodling around. But at that point, try and sort of go, no, I'm listening hard. What is that kind of making my wrist do? And that's another thing, is that when I did that first one, because it's got a beat, this kind of 4 on the floor bass drum, doof, 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 you know, I could feel it sometimes. It was like I was trying to sort of dance with my hand. And, you know, we all dance and we pull certain shapes. When we dance to music, there's a sort of abstraction out, like what makes us kind of fling an arm out at one point or move a foot and so on. So in a way, this is a bit like dancing with marks. And that's another way in which I sometimes talk or refer to my work, because it all happens quite quickly. I make things quite quickly. It might look, you know, on the internet that my work is very labored and slow, but actually, probably every painting you just saw on the thing is made within a day. Most of my paintings are made just within one sitting, in sometimes a long day, but literally in one day. Anyway, we should get on with this. So, same again, I'm going to use the charcoal this time. I haven't done this with the charcoal before. So I'm going to use this piece of charcoal and we're going to play this one, which I just warn you, is quite kind of full on, quite a sort of claustrophobic noise. But we'll use that one because I want to do it twice. And that's when I want to sort of introduce the color and see what happens there. So, ready to go?
Yeah. Yeah. Blimey. That's quite an intense sound. Hopefully it's kind of loud enough, or if in the deaf unit you can kind of feel that. It was quite a sort of full sound. So it was that like woof, woof, woof kept falling down, and it felt like these huge kind of swoops of my kind of wrist, but then there was this kind of like almost scratching noise over the top thing, like that, which just felt really annoying and kind of like anxious, and so that's why I did these kind of scribbles over the top. So
I have no idea how we're going to add. Oh, you also probably noticed that I got my side of my hand to sort of smudge it out, and that somehow I just felt like I kind of wanted to pull across it. It was getting too loaded up, so I have actually got a rag here that I could have also used, but I just pulled my fist across, and it's just again just trying to sort of like really engage with this surface and the material you're kind of using. So what I'm going to do now is just, because I kind of thought, you know, I want to bring colour into this as well. I've also got some watercolours here that hopefully you can see. I've got this brush, which is actually like a sort of Chinese calligraphy brush. It looks really posh and really expensive, but weirdly, I picked this one up pretty cheap. And I just really like this one because you know, some water. It's just, there's something really floppy about it when it's loaded up with water. And I also wanted to just say, like, although I'm kind of an artist and been working out of college for some time, there are some materials that just like the cheap versions of these, like these, you probably remember these from kind of school, but these cheap watercolor sets are so good. The only thing you do need to do is, what I tend to do is load them up with water before you start. And the reason for that is that it just soaks the water into the pigment and softens them up. So if you go to grab the color, the fact that they're already wet means that you can sort of pick up that color instantaneously. And that's why I've chosen watercolor. I've got some more here that are bigger, these little pots, which I've just literally filled up with watercolor. And again, I've sort of wet all these up ready, and I'll probably just grab them from here. But, you know, as I say, this kind of set is perfect. I'm going to grab from here just because they're bigger and I can get some big quantities of it and start painting. I'm also, a new thing today, I just armed myself with some emulsion. And just in case everything gets a bit too out of hand, I've got some white emulsion just on another brush, which I'm just going to pull in. And then if things get way out of hand, I've got like a household kind of brush that I can really get in there with a big brush. But, you know, that's basically what I'm going to use. So we're going to listen to the same piece of sound. Apologies if you found it a bit uncomfortable the first time. We're going to listen to it again. And then I'm going to try and sort of feed some kind of colour into here that kind of makes sense in relation to the sound. I might try and relax a bit more this time. That time I was a bit kind of like, yeah, sort of all tightened up. But so here we go again. Any questions about what we're doing now?
We just had one comment from Hannah, the occupational therapist at the Deaf Ward, joining us, and she's telling us that some of the group could hear and some couldn't. So it's interesting to hear that, yeah, some were feeling that those sounds. Yeah,
cool. It might be that this sound, I think most of the frequencies are probably medium to high frequency, so it would depend on the kind of ability of sound. But yeah, let's try that. So if not, 1 minute to eat as many chocolates as you can. You can't hear the music, the sound. So we're just same drawing, working into the same one, and we're just going to add colour and see what happens. Again, a minute. Okay, I would have liked a bit more time there, but I had two very sort of simple, basic thoughts. This kind of annoying noise that I was kind of scratching across the top. I thought it would have you kind of like sort of quite hot or acidic kind of colours like yellow and orange, And then I sort of thought I'd use blue and green that seemed more serene for the kind of swoops or whatever. But it kind of ran into itself and whatever, and I'm still kind of happy with that. It's kind of fine. I've still got a lot of the remnants of the drawing behind, and it's just been sort of punctuated by some colour in there. But yeah, so I'm going to carefully put that one to one side. And just to let you know, I'm just using scrap mount board, but as I say, you can do this on A4 paper out of a photocopier. You can do this on an ordinary sketchbook or a piece of newsprint. You know, it doesn't matter. That's the beauty of this. You can sort of work on it on whatever you want. This time, I'm going to go straight into the colour. So whatever you're using for colour, let's just literally go straight in for colour and maybe then apply the black and white later. In fact, I might even have a free-for-all, and I might start with colour and then try to feed some black and white, maybe marker pen in while it's going. And because of that kind of thing, we're going to pick a slightly longer one, which this one is sort of, it has some gaps, and it's not quite, I have made it as if it's like a piece of music, but if you like, it's like a sort of more contemporary classical piece of music in which sort of it's quite random and quite offbeat, okay? But there are certain things that repeat over and over again that you'll hear certain times, but they'll come in quite a sort of random fashion. This is about 4 minutes, so I'm going to just use this one to just use everything that I've got in front of me as and when it occurs to me during the kind of process of making it. Is there any questions? Hello?
No questions coming through at this point, Andy.
Cool. So let's go for it. So 4 minutes, and I'll see you on the other side. Ah. Oh, stop. I wanted that to go on a bit longer. I suddenly picked up the white and I thought that would kind of press into it, kind of really interesting. It started to get a bit overloaded. Let me just put a piece of paper in front of this. There's another thing about working in this way. It's not necessarily the best at the end, you know, which is obviously what you want if you're trying to make a painting. But there are certain moments in this, with this work, which I kind of liked it at that point. You know, we were only halfway through, so I had to push on. But, you know, I'm still kind of happy. I'd still kind of come back to this later and have a look at it and see if there's sort of parts that I can kind of think about in relation to my painting and so on. But yeah, I was just trying to sort of think about those those rises and dips in the music, and there was these interruptions, or whatever, that kind of kept coming in, and so I was sort of trying to use them to sort of inject these. I was also conscious of kept moving the colour around as well. So in the end, I've come up with something. I think this is, in a way, I think this is the best one I've done so far out. There's 6 or 7 like this, that, you know, in relation to the variety of colour, and that's why I was sort of, you know, if I wasn't with you lot, I'd probably cheat a bit and kind of push some more white into that, just to bring out some of those kind of marks. And the white would sort of start to pick up the watercolour and so on. This is literally just white, you know, household and white emulsion. But yeah, I like it. I'm pleased with that one. And I sort of really enjoyed, that was the one I sort of thought was the most kind of sculptural. How are we doing for time, Louis?
It's now 20 minutes to, but we're always happy to sort of carry on a bit longer if you want to do a few more.
Cool. Well, I just thought, you know, I've subjected you to some sort of fairly kind of heavy sounds. I just wondered whether we should do the Nightingale as a slightly more kind of relaxed sort of interpretation of sound. And I think this one, yeah, it's about 2 minutes. So just keeping in mind that idea of, you know, you're now, everything you've heard so far is abstract sounds, right? Now, this one is a recording of a nightingale. And of course, a nightingale, you know, you might not be able to visualize a nightingale, but you visualize a bird singing this song. But try not to think about that at all. Just try and, if you like, interpret the sounds of this bird song in the same way. I mean, actually, I think birdsong is really similar to sort of synthesizers. The reverberations and the oscillations that you get within bird sounds, you know, are really achievable on kind of modern synthesizers, or even, you know, old school analog synthesizers. So try to, when you're listening to the Nightingale, try to think about it in those terms, that they're these vibrations and so on. In relation to the deaf unit, I'd be really interested whether you can hear these high-pitched noises and whether they kind of reverberate. It'd be really interesting to see how you kind of interpret them, and let me know afterwards. Again, I think it's just fun for me to have everything available. Again, so we know, you know, don't have to do this just in pencil or just marker pen. Just use whatever's in front of you to sort of to have a go at this, and it's just under 2 minutes. So are there any questions?
We just had a few comments. So Kirsten's asked if you've ever painted with other body parts or your whole body, and she says she can imagine painting with feet to music.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I've never, have I ever used, yeah, I sometimes, in my oil painting, I sometimes press my fingers into it, because sometimes I'm sort of frustrated with the marks that start, and we end up kind of like pushing it around, like it's this wet paint, that I push my fingers around. And you noticed earlier when I just was using the charcoal, I just got my fist and sort of rubbed the side of my hand and kind of thing, but I've never used actual body parts. Of course, there's some famous examples of this. Yves Klein dragging sort of naked bodies around canvases with blue paint on and so on, and those body prints. And there are other examples as well where they use. But yeah, nice idea that, yeah, why not use your feet? Because like then it would be almost like dancing. There was also really funny, yeah, I mean, you can use whatever tool you like. I remember someone from the Royal College made paintings by cycling over them, for instance. So yeah, I use brushes and pens and pencils and whatever, perhaps in a non-orthodox way, but I use them because they are just very good at achieving a wide variety of kind of marks, and I feel really comfortable with them. But for sure, other body parts impress on, you know, if that's immediate to you, then for sure. Anything else?
Which had another question, which I think relates back to when you're talking about kind of working into that painting. Dorothy asked whether you could select an area of the painting you like and then redo it as a painting in itself, as a new piece.
Absolutely. So really good idea. So if I just bring this one back, you know, I kind of keep looking at this area here, and you know, this is a very full, you know, for this kind of scale, it's a very full composition. Like, it's a very kind of dense. But I really like this kind of area in here. So yeah, you could blow that up and kind of make that as a sort of more, a slower kind of painting. But I suppose, or you could literally just cut it up and select that section. But I suppose I just want to reiterate that point, that this is a sort of exercise to think about sound and to really push our mark making. It might not make great pieces of art, or great paintings, even what you think to be, but don't worry about that, you know. Like, you know, I don't think that's a very good one, but I like that one for some reason. But I'm not sure I was necessarily, you know, that was how it came out. It wasn't necessarily I was doing that really badly or whatever. But yeah, you could pick a section and blow that up into a bigger painting, absolutely. So use these as if they're like starting points for other paintings that might take you a longer time. Right, I think we'll play the Nightingale then.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
And Paz, can I use my hand?
Yeah, the only thing I would say that I've with my sort of public sort of health and safety hat on, as long as you're only using sort of watercolors and things that are not toxic, yeah, use your hand for sure. As I say, you know, sometimes I use my fingerprint like this on my paintings, just to sort of make dots, and it kind of leaves this lovely lift of your kind of fingerprint and so on. So yeah, use your hands, use whatever's around you. And oh, sorry. With the last question, it also made me think about the fact that you probably noticed me pick up a napkin or this rag I was using as well. And you know, sometimes in these exercises, they get like really loaded up. And it was partly sort of thinking about the rests in music, like the bits of sort of silence to sort of pull them out. But also it's just to stop it getting too clogged up. Like if I'd have carried on with all that watercolor, it would have just been a sort of brown puddle. So sometimes dabbing, you know, this is also as much as a sort of mark making tool as the brush. You know, it's like the sort of positive and negative, like they're both as important to each other, as the note and the rest are just as important in music. So yeah, and that's why I was really looking forward to putting the whiting, because that felt a bit like sort of getting some sort of clarity back. But yeah, rags, this is just an old sock. And serviettes or whatever, just to dab off and take off as well. But yeah, your hands, nails, scratching, whatever. Actually, that reminds me, what's kind of interesting, when we're using the marker pen, there was a sort of noise to the marking that was kind of, you know, like, obviously when I was listening to the sound, the music, as well as my noise of drawing, and lots of people talk about the sort of noise of drawing, you know, like, it kind of makes its own kind of noise. So maybe that's another thing to sort of think how you could link them a bit more in your head. Okay, Nightingale. went back to the saucer later. But let's. I'm just going to keep playing it for. I want another minute. Sorry, but I want another minute. So I'm just going to play it for another minute. Carry on. Right, I found that really difficult. Maybe it's because it's sort of recognizable. Yeah, no, I just found it really difficult, but it's so high pitched, it's so sort of buzzy, that I kind of just kept thinking of these sort of lines, because it was almost like this continuous noise that just fluctuated with these really high pitched noises. And I found that really difficult, but hey, I kind of, in the end, sort of enjoy the fact that I've ended up with something very different to what I ended up with the last piece of sound, you know, which I'm glad of. I'd hope that would be the case, that, you know, a different piece of sound would inspire a very different painting and kind of reaction to it. But, you know, the thing with this one is I just kept thinking about, just try and put a piece of paper underneath it. Oops. I just kept thinking about this sort of like kind of noises that were just unimaginably kind of quick. You know, the idea that a bird's larynx is sort of moving that quite like that. So that was kind of what I was sort of concentrating on. And then there were these sudden kind of sharp interruptions that I sort of thought sort of cut across it. So yeah. Any questions?
No more questions in at the minute though, Andy, but me and Phoebe have been joining in and we've had a really great time painting along. It's really interesting to see the kind of different ways we've responded. And we've had a comment from Angela who said, I just closed my eyes throughout. So maybe she was just enjoying the sounds of the
Yeah, well, it's a nightingale. They're beautiful things. And you know, if you just close your eyes, then maybe also what you kind of visualize when your eyes are closed, you know, like what's in your mind's eye, can be an inspiration itself for kind of making whatever. But yeah, fair play to you. Yeah, it's a beautiful noise, the bird.
Yeah, that's the only comment we've had now, but we are coming up to kind of 5 to 3 now, so I guess we'll wrap up for today. But thanks so much to Andy. That's been an amazing session. I'll just get myself up on the screen as well, so while I'm talking. So yeah, thank you to Andy. That's been really great. As always, like I said at the beginning, we'd love to see what everyone's been doing in the workshop. It's always great to see people's work, but I think especially today, it'll be interesting to see how people have responded differently to the sounds. We've had a question. Barbara said brilliant and thank you. So yeah, I think it's been an amazing session, and we'll share that link for people to share their own work, and it would be good to see. What do you think, Andy? Would it be nice for people to kind of write with the pictures they send in what image it was responding to, or
which sound it was responding to? Yeah, that'd be kind of, or maybe just write when it's dry, if they've used wet paint or whatever, just write it on the back or whatever. And even if they, I mean, it'd be interesting, even if they, I don't think I used the titles of any of these pieces of sound. I think I did once mention it, but I won't mention it again. But you know, even if you just describe, again, another way of sort of interpreting the sound is to just use some sort of keywords that would come to mind when you remember what the sound was, you know. So I was talking about these kind of really fast reverberations and this kind of cuts across and whatever. So again, even just sort of describing sound is a way of kind of translating it. And I think that's what we're sort of talking about here, is we're sort of translating one thing we hear for our ears, you know, one kind of sense, or if you're deaf, you know, how you feel it kind of gutturally, or the frequencies you kind of pick up on and so on. Or, as we were saying, another sense, such as taste and smell. You know, like, I think what we do is we tend to sort of separate senses up too much in contemporary life. And we don't think as our sort of sensorial life as being much more continuous. You know, so smells bleed into tastes, bleed into kind of vision, bleed into sound and so on. And it's not like they're kind of discrete, separate senses. Somehow we physically kind of, like it's more of a sort of spectrum. We sort of, we interpret them, they all work together. And so it's trying to sort of, if you like, sort of connect them even more by taking what we hear or what we sense and trying to sort of find equivalents in mark making and hence making drawing, painting, whatever.
Yeah, we just had another message from Hannah from the deaf ward, and everyone there is really grateful that they've had the other sense. So thank us for that. So no problem, guys, and it'd be really interesting, to see what you've produced. Yeah,
fantastic. Really like to see that.
And Kirsten also saying, thinking of all the extended remixes she can play and paint to. So long pieces.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, get a kind of live mix from Radio 6 or something, and just tune out and kind of, you know, begin drawing.
Great, thanks so much, Andy. I'll just sort of a few more housekeeping things as we close up. As we said, the YouTube of this session will be up this afternoon in the next hour or so. And I thought that'd be really interesting to kind of look back at the kind of moments through the painting. You were saying there were moments earlier on that you liked. So it'd be good it'd be nice to kind of track back and see how it develops. And as we said at the beginning, there's also the shorter 10-minute version. We'll also be sending out a questionnaire for units. So as always, any feedback on the sessions is really helpful to us, so we can always improve them. It would be great to hear how people have kind of found working with sound. And of course, the Dropbox link we'll share. Next week, we've got Nina Royal, who's going to be making her own paint. So we're going to be sending out pigment to anyone who wants to be involved. There'll be a message about that soon, but do get in touch if you want some pigment sent to you. So we're making our own paint, so maybe you can do some painting to sound again with the paint you make in Nina's workshop. So that's all for me to say. Thanks so much to Andy. And again, just a few more comments saying thanks for the session. Apparently Pierre Mondrian also worked with sound.
Right, okay, yeah, Boogie Woogie, exactly. Meant to be one of the best representations of New York ever. Yeah, Boogie Woogie paintings are sort of based on sort of jazz compositions and so on. So yeah, another good example.
Great, thanks very much, Andy, and thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.